Good evening, I'm Michelle Ghoussoub. The flag outside BC's legislature flew at half-mast today in honor of the province's 36th premier. John Horgan, who led the NDP to victory in 2017, has died at the age of 65 after a third battle with cancer.
It's with heavy hearts. We learned about the passing of John Horgan this morning. John was a remarkable man, both in the history of this province and just who he was as a person. His legacy for British Columbia is profound.
Following his turn at the helm of this province, Horgan served as Canada's ambassador to Germany before leaving the position due to illness. Mira Baines now on the life and the legacy of John from Langford.
You may recall last fall I was the Premier of British Columbia.
The former BC Premier, known affectionately as Premier Dad, died peacefully Tuesday, surrounded by friends and family. John Horgan's family asked for privacy but released a statement. It read, "The well-being of British Columbia and everyone in it was everything to him. He was surrounded by family, friends, and love in his final days."
Now, with his passing, we all grieve along with the Horgan family.
An emotional Premier David Eby reflected on his friend and mentor who brought the BC NDP back from 16 years in the political wilderness to take power.
He made them think differently about politics and about politicians. He was accessible, he was fun and funny, and he was called Premier Dad.
Horgan was first elected for the provincial NDP in 2005 and was known as John from Langford.
I have two brothers and a sister. I was raised by a single mother. My father died when I was a baby, and so they've had a profound impact on raising me.
He got hooked on politics, working in the background in the 1990s, and he decided to run himself. He had the common touch.
He was able to connect with you, sit down, have a conversation, have a beer, whatever, whether you agreed with his politics or you didn't agree with his politics.
With his gift of the gab and political smarts, he steered the NDP towards the center of the political spectrum. Along the way, he evolved from being viewed as an angry opposition leader to a popular premier able to work across party lines.
And if you want to have working people, being able to look after their families, the economy needs to grow. He really understood that.
In 2017, he emerged victorious from a tight election, making a deal with the Green Party leader to hold power, famously photographed with Green's then leader Andrew Weaver at a rugby game. Under his leadership, the legislature passed the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act in 2019 to move forward reconciliation.
That was a big step. No other province has done that.
In 2020, he shrewdly called a snap election, capturing a majority as he helped guide the province through the pandemic. His government created a program for $10 a day daycare, removed tolls on 2 lower mainland bridges, and eliminated MSP premiums.
The number one thing he did was get rid of money out of politics. No party now has a huge competitive advantage because of wealthy people buying votes. And I think that's something that hopefully is a long-term legacy from John Horgan.
He was a feisty competitor.
Do you want a headline or do you want action?
He faced challenges head-on, including BC wildfires, floods, and public anger over plans for a pricey new Royal BC Museum, which he walked back. He was the first NDP leader to bring the BC NDP to 2 consecutive terms. Horgan stepped down as premier in 2022 amid health challenges. Condolences are pouring in, including from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and others. Horgan had reflected on his time in office on his last day as an elected official.
My greatest sense of accomplishment is that I was able to work with anybody at any time to try and improve the condition of the people in British Columbia.
His family saluted him with a favorite quote of the Star Trek fan, "Live long and prosper." Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
For more on John Horgan's life and legacy here in BC, let's bring in Stuart Prest, political scientist and lecturer at UBC. Stuart, John Horgan did not spend much time, if any, speaking publicly about his own legacy. How do you think he should be remembered by British Columbians today?
Well, it's a good question, and I think we heard off the top there a number of the themes that are going to resonate in future years. He was a bridge builder, someone who helped move the NDP towards the center of the political spectrum, and somebody who a lot of British Columbians came to identify with, someone that they felt really was authentic in the role of opposition leader and then as premier, and someone that they were willing to give the benefit of the doubt to, someone that they ultimately could trust in the office of premier.
The NDP had a tremendous amount of support under Horgan. Why do you think his leadership resonated so well with so many British Columbians?
Well, Mr. Horgan was able to occupy a space that I think was different than a typical politician. He wasn't strongly ideological. He was, one quip had it, the rightmost member of the NDP caucus, somebody who tilted towards the center and was able to speak to issues that were different than others perhaps within the caucus. He could speak to island issues as someone representing Vancouver Island to folks in the mainland. He could speak to rural issues, to urban centers. So that sense of being able to see different perspectives and not just focus on one set of ideals, I think really stood him in good stead.
And what do you think about his communication style was kind of unique to his persona?
Absolutely. He was somebody who, for better and for worse, could speak off the cuff and speak his mind. And quite often, I think that helped endear voters to him. It gave that sense that he really was saying what he thought about issues. Occasionally got him into hot water when he lost his temper or said something that was intemperate. But that authenticity then was one of his saving graces as well. I think the fact that when he made a mistake, he was quick to own up to it and point to a different direction. And he really seemed to learn from those mistakes. I think all that helped build this legacy of a politician that people saw themselves in and felt they could trust.
All right, Stuart Press, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
BC's provincial health officer says the teenager who was tested positive for bird flu is in critical condition and being treated at BC Children's Hospital.
This person was admitted to the BC Children's Hospital late on Friday, and over the weekend their condition had varied. And sadly, they right now remain in critical condition.
She says it's likely that the teenager contracted the illness from exposure to an animal or the environment, although there's a very real possibility that the source will never be found. Henry says 12 other people have been tested for avian flu, including medical workers who came into contact with the teen. So far, no one else has tested positive. And Labour Minister Stephen McKinnon has sent labour disputes at ports in BC and Quebec to binding arbitration. He's ordered people back to work after the disputes reached what he called a total impasse.
And mediators determined that no path forward is possible based on the inflexibility on both sides.
The national president of Teamsters Canada called that caving in. In a statement, François Laporte said the government failed to force employers to bargain in good faith, and that nullified workers' rights. But business leaders expressed relief.
This dispute couldn't come at a worse time, where we are seeing a lot of small and medium businesses waiting for their holiday shipments. We know, because we started the port calculator just last week, that already $6 billion worth of trade was disrupted. So to have things get back on track and have the federal government intervene is a real relief right now.
They say with the new U.S. president about to take office, it's a crucial moment for Canada to be seen as a reliable and cost-effective trading partner. Well, Canadians could soon be affected by more job action as Canada Post workers are threatening to strike. They've given 72 hours notice and could be in a legal strike position to picket by Friday. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers have been in talks with the Crown Corporation for a year now. The sticking points in mediation are wage increases, pensions, and medical leave. Canada Post is warning a strike could have devastating financial impacts and affect customers ahead of the busy holiday season, especially in rural communities. Police are warning dog owners to be on the lookout after finding fentanyl-shaped dog biscuits. The drugs were recovered in Surrey in what's being called a sophisticated drug dealing operation. Nearly 3.5 kilograms of fentanyl, 28 grams of cocaine, 5 guns, body armor, and jewelry were found. Police say the amount of fentanyl that was seized equals about 2 million lethal doses. A man and woman from Surrey are facing several charges, including trafficking a controlled substance and possession of a firearm without a license.
Thank you.
The city of Vancouver wants to better safeguard privately owned buildings from a major earthquake. A new study says a magnitude 7.2 earthquake would damage thousands of buildings, many of them housing renters. Chad Pawson reports.
It's not a matter of if, but when a major earthquake strikes Vancouver. It's a sobering thought. The good news is Vancouver has been preparing, but now recognizes a gap in certain types of buildings in Vancouver, especially those that house the city's renters.
The risk assessment shows that many of those impacted could also be those who are least able to prepare for an earthquake and also least able to cope with an earthquake afterwards.
City staff say changes are needed to help owners of privately owned, oftentimes older buildings retrofit them or upgrade them to better withstand an earthquake.
And it sounds to me that one of the big takeaways is that our preparedness levels need to get higher. Not only are we talking about the buildings, but our public needs to be ready for what might be coming.
Yes, both preparedness and risk reduction need to be key focuses as we move forward.
New modeling from the city shows a 7.2 magnitude earthquake would damage or destroy nearly 6,100 buildings, injure or kill more than 1,350 people, and disrupt and displace over 1/3 of residents and workers for more than 3 months. Less than 10% of buildings drive 80% of the risk. Those buildings, made of concrete, unreinforced masonry, or wood, are in specific neighborhoods: the West End, the downtown East Side, downtown, Kitsilano, Fairview, and Mount Pleasant. There has been work done to earthquake-proof schools, public buildings, and bridges, but experts say not enough with privately owned buildings, such as those in several Vancouver neighborhoods.
So we have lots of high-rise buildings in the West End that were built before we knew how to design for earthquakes. So some of those buildings have a very high risk during a significant earthquake. And this is the start of identifying those buildings and then doing something about it.
Damage from a 7.2 magnitude earthquake would result in a $17 billion financial loss to the city, with much of that due to damage or the collapse of vulnerable buildings like those here in the West End. The city doesn't know how much it will cost for needed upgrades, but it's coming up with a plan for that now and a way to make sure that those upgrades happen. But there's no time to waste. There's a 1 in 5 chance of a very strong earthquake happening in Vancouver sometime in the next 50 years. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Darius Maravi joins us now with a first look at the weather. Darius, what's the latest on the storm rolling in?
We're seeing that heavy rain. We're seeing those winds start to pick up in many places. That's why we have so many warnings in place. You can see all that moist air coming in over the province. You can see we have wind warnings blanketing pretty much all coastal sections of the island, parts of the Sunshine Coast, Metro Vancouver, the Central Coast as well. Rainfall warnings up on Haida Gwaii as well as in Metro Vancouver, and then one winter storm warning because those mountain passes, as I see that system move into the interior, we'll likely see a fair dump of snow. You can see that system continuing to roll in. This is a few hours ago as it just started to move in over the province, and we're continuing to see that rain pick up. Going to continue to see that overnight tonight, likely going to be heavy at times tomorrow morning as well on northern sections of Metro Vancouver. Environment Canada has issued warnings about that. And also be aware that Thursday and Friday looking a little bit more dry, but we got to get through these winds first, Michelle.
All right, thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
There's a new face coming to the Vancouver Canucks, 20-year-old Jonathan Lekkerimäki making his NHL debut.
The Vancouver Canucks are proud to select from Sweden the SHL Djurgården Jonathan Lekkerimäki.
Drafted 15th overall in 2022 in the 2022 NHL draft, he spent the start of this year playing with the Abbotsford Canucks, scoring 5 goals and 7 points in 7 games before being asked to bring his talents to the big show. The 20-year-old hails from Sweden. With many British Columbians pinching their pennies, One Good Samaritan out in Chilliwack is working to ensure people have access to fresh produce and other goods. How the free store is grappling with increased demand. Next.
This is Vancouver is a new CBC podcast where we explore the issues the stories and the people that make this place home. Listen to This is Vancouver wherever you get your podcasts.
In Chilliwack, one volunteer-run initiative is working to support people struggling to access food. As Monia Blanchet reports, the Free Store says its mission isn't just to give food to people in need, but to help foster community spirit.
Chilliwack, in the Fraser Valley. Here, like the rest of BC, locals are feeling the pinch from rising rent and grocery prices. Raylene Mumford has been working in addiction and mental health for almost 20 years. She has seen how difficult accessing food can be, not only for vulnerable people, but also for middle-class families too. Mumford says she also wants to tackle the amount of food going to waste in the province.
And I felt like if we could put that together, it just made sense.
That's what led her almost 6 years ago to create the Free Store, where every Friday people can sign up online to pick up a basket of produce put together by the team of volunteers or come stock up on Sundays.
They can come and have a free shopping experience. They can pick fresh food fresh produce, bread, things that they want to eat, and then it reduces food waste as well.
Unlike food banks, there are no questions asked about people's financial situations.
Now it is zero barriers, so we don't keep any names or information. You're struggling so much already that for me to come at you, so we like to be super confidential and allow people a chance to get food.
Ramona is one of the store's customers.
My grandparents always taught me to budget and how to handle situations, right? But I mean, when you move countries and you encounter situations you cannot manage, or you lose your job last minute and you already paid all the bills, but now there's no money for food, then you go to places like this.
She comes to the store when she's having a hard time making ends meet. And she says that makes all the difference in the world.
For example, if I do get a hamper, the hamper alone, I think maybe has a worth of $120 or more. It's $120 I can use for some bills, right? Or if I would drive a car, then I could use it for gas and I could go to work. So yes, it does make a difference.
And we got some nice fruits. We will make a yogurt out of it.
Ramona says she shares what she picks up with friends who are also struggling.
Because in the end, my friends are valued to me in many, many, many ways. They became family to me. So when I need help, they're there for me, so vice versa.
Ramona agreed to speak on camera because she wants people to know that there's nothing wrong asking for help.
But I think it's important that people know that people like Raylene are out there. And there are people like me out there who sometimes go to places like this. And it's okay to ask for help. Raylene does not need to ask any questions of like why you are here, what's your name, where are you living, and what's your situation. And Raylene is that person who says like, you need help, I help you.
The free store doesn't get any subsidies, instead relying on donations and volunteers to operate. At the moment, the store feeds more than 400 people a week.
We're almost like a pop-up free store during the weekends. And during the week, we have 2 other locations where people drop off and pick up other items.
Food that's left over on Sundays is used to make soups and preserves, which are then distributed in the community. Although a lot of people who visit the free store are homeless or escaping difficult family situations, Mumford says she's seeing more and more middle-class families who are feeling squeezed by rising prices coming by to pick up food.
We need to help each other out right now. So we get a lot of folks who come here for a couple weeks and never access the service again. And they, in fact, end up donating back to us. And so it's kind of like we have actually become quite a family, to be honest.
Monia Blanchet, CBC News, Chilliwack.
A look at the day that was in wonderful Whistler, BC. The mountain town, like so much of this province, is expected to get some cold and wet weather throughout the week, but it wasn't too bad today. See some low-hanging clouds blocking out those snowy peaks. We'll have your full BC-wide forecast coming up in just a few moments. Businesses in BC are bracing for potential economic impacts from a second Trump presidency in the U.S., including a new tariff of at least 10% on all American imports. It's something that could further hurt the province's softwood lumber industry, which has already been hit by the Biden administration, nearly doubling the duty it charges on softwood lumber. Joining me now for more on what might change is John Brink, CEO of the Brink Group of Companies, which focuses on lumber remanufacturing. John, these tariffs already exist in the softwood lumber industry. How do you think things might change under President Trump?
Well, President Trump has already a reputation from his first term as that he believes in tariffs and has indicated that he intends to put those into place once he comes into office fairly quickly. And additional, I'm not sure if it is additional to what we already pay as duties or a 10% across the board. If it was against 10% across the board, that is less than we're paying now. But I don't think that will happen. So not good news. Let me put it that way.
And what specific challenges do you think that Canadian forestry companies could face if these large tariffs are imposed next year?
I don't think that things can get much worse than they are now. Duties have increased from 8.5% before August to 14.5% duties already. And then some of the larger companies like Canfor are at something like 17%. West Fraser, somewhere in that area. Irving and Tolko are in that area as well, and they may go already, and that is based on anti-dumping 5, that means 2022, and 2023 we already know that they will again be challenged for anti-dumping, and the duties may go as high as 30 to 35%. And then that is 23, 24, it may go a little bit lower, and on and on and on.
And given those challenges you outlined, do you think that BC's forestry industry should be pivoting towards other markets or perhaps focusing on domestic demand here at home?
Well, we'd like to focus on other markets, but there is limited amount of other markets because it's a very, very competitive global market all around the case. And in terms of Canada, we have a large industry in Canada for the consumption that we have. So we're relying substantially on the US market. Now, secondary manufacturing or value-added manufacturers, we should do more value-added manufacturing here in Canada, and in particular in BC. And we have not done that very well. Brink has been in business for 50 years in value-added manufacturing. Very difficult to get raw material for value-added manufacturing, although it likely is the best market for the primary manufacturers in looking not only now, but also looking forward.
All right, John Brink, CEO of the Brink Group of Companies, thank you so much. We appreciate your perspective tonight.
Thanks, Michelle.
Nearly 10,000 Abbotsford residents have been under a boil water advisory for days. E. coli was detected in one of the water district's reservoirs late last week. As John Hernandez reports, while concerns in the community are mounting, the district hopes it won't be long before residents can once again drink from the tap.
Water can be a hot commodity at Puneet Gill's daycare. 8 kids go here and they're known to get thirsty.
My one kid almost drank more than 1 liter. They are always running and then playing together, running around, and they need more water.
So she's had to boil a lot of water over the past few days. She's among 10,000 residents in Abbotsford's Clearbrook neighborhood who were issued a boil water advisory on Friday.
And the person come out and give us a letter and told us, don't use this water because there is a bacteria inside the water.
The notice was sent out more than a day after E. coli bacteria was found in the Clearbrook Waterworks District's water supply. The district says its reservoir was breached. Residents like Carla Langager, who is immunocompromised, are growing increasingly anxious.
We were shocked because this thing happened on the 7th. And so we've been drinking the water for 2 days.
Clearbrook Waterworks says it sent out the notice as soon as it was aware of the breach. District officials say the reservoir where the E. coli was found has been drained. It says no E. coli has been found in the water's distribution network so far.
The in-house samples are all coming back clear, and we are waiting for more reporting from the third-party lab because of the long weekend.
The district says it's working with Fraser Health to figure out exactly how the E. coli got into the reservoir. If independent samples are clear as well, the advisory is expected to be lifted on Wednesday.
It's very upsetting to know that people are scared, that they may have lost faith in us, but we remain diligent and dedicated. We're here every day through the weekend working on it.
Until then, the district and Fraser Health are urging residents to keep boiling, warning that the E. coli bacteria can be particularly hard on infants and the elderly. John Hernandez, CBC News, Abbotsford.
In the shadow of the diplomatic fallout between Canada and India, a Canadian border agent says he fears for his life. Evan Dyer spoke to him about the threats coming from India and what he's doing to keep his family safe.
Sunny Sidhu has worked in Canada's Border Services Agency for 2 decades. Here he appears on the global TV show Border Security. Since that show was recorded, he's been promoted to the rank of superintendent. It was a YouTube video posted a year ago and since removed that first alerted him to danger.
Now we've got you in our sights. I'm Major Gaurav Arya and you're watching the Chanakya Dialogues English.
Major Gaurav Arya, a pro-Modi influencer with ties to Indian intelligence agencies,
Canadian terrorists,
included Sunny Sidhu in a list of wanted Khalistani terrorists.
Canada has become a safe haven for Khalistani terrorists. Not only are the Khalistanis being given a free run and platform, they're also employed by the Canadian government. Can you believe that?
It was the start of a campaign accusing Sunny Sidhu of terrorism and murder across Indian television, newspapers, and social media, including his family's address and violent threats.
I have zero links to any of these organizations. I've never supported these organizations. I don't know any members in these organizations. So they're pulling these allegations out of thin air.
Sidhu had every reason to worry. Another man named in one of Major Arya's videos was shot dead in Winnipeg the next day.
Sukhadul Singh.
That man did have links to Punjabi gangs. Sidhu believes he's being targeted because he, as well as his brothers, are Canadian public servants.
If I was Sunny, the blueberry farmer, we wouldn't be sitting here. I've protected our country for 20 years, and I need our country to protect me. I've been told you cannot be picking up your daughter at school. I have to change vehicles. I've had to relocate my family to a different residence.
Sidhu told CBSA as soon as he learned about the video.
They've gone through my bank statements, my telephone records. I was subject to 2 days of polygraph examinations.
CBSA says it found no evidence to support the allegations made in the articles against our employee, Mr. Sidhu. Sidhu's lawyers say the accusation is part of a campaign of violence and disinformation on Canadian soil.
There is an orchestrated campaign by a foreign entity that has nefarious purposes. They have accused him of something that is just patently not true.
Sidhu has spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to protect his family. This former CSIS director says the Canadian government has a responsibility.
He is being subjected to all of this because he's a Crown servant, largely, I think. So yeah, there is a duty, I think, of care and concern. And I can't see any reasons why, with the vast resources of the government of Canada, they couldn't have put him in a better position.
Sidhu's lawyers are now in talks with the federal government to see if they can do more for him, including protection for him and his family. The scandal left a stain on Canadian soccer. Today, that black mark on the red and white got bigger. A new report into this drone spying case that dominated the Paris Olympics, suggesting this was not Canada's first time. Darius Maravi joins us once again. Darius, it really feels like one of those dark and stormy nights out there.
Yes, it is. Although, after this, we've got a few clearer ones. So, soak up the rain, I guess. Most places, hopefully, will be able to soak up all the rain that is coming down. Totals shouldn't be too high in most places across the south coast, although the west coast of Vancouver Island could see some fairly high totals, as per usual. And the north shore of Metro Vancouver as well as other sections that are further north, up at higher elevations, Coquitlam, Pitt Meadows, those areas could see totals as high as 80 to maybe even 100 millimeters in some localized spots. So we've seen that moisture continue to move in over the province. We have all these warnings in place, lots of wind warnings, a rainfall warning in place, really just for Metro Vancouver. You can see all that rain and snow starting to come down, some of those higher elevations. Freezing levels are going to remain low enough that we will see snow on top of many of the mountains, and in many places it will be a pretty good dump of snow, in fact. And if we take a look at our precipitation forecast across the province, we're seeing that system hit now is going to continue to roll in, move and spread some unsettled and snowy conditions to much of the interior. In the valleys, they'll fall as rain, but pretty much on all the ridge tops, freezing levels should mean that we're going to see that as snow. And then pretty much after that, we have a couple more calm days, at least here on the south coast and in southern BC, still seeing some of those showers pop up, some of those flurries pop up at times on Thursday. Friday looking even clearer, if anything. And the next system is expected to roll in Saturday, potentially into Sunday. But for now, keep in mind those winds are also going to be blowing quite strong on the south coast. I'm not showing that graphic here, but be aware, again, the winds gusting up to 100 kilometers per hour in some spots here in Metro Vancouver, probably gusting up to 90, even possibly 100. So be aware of that if you are going to be down by the water. You can see in terms of those totals, not too high in the interior, but here on the coast, some sections seeing them get up quite high. Again, keep in mind this is only over the next 48 hours. So we're talking, from throughout the day on Wednesday and Thursday. So all the rain that is coming before midnight is not counted in here. But you can see even then the totals in places like West Vancouver are going to be quite high. In terms of conditions across the province tomorrow, we do have pretty much unsettled conditions across the province. Very few places we're expecting to see some sunshine or breaks in the clouds because things are just looking quite cloudy as that continues to spread throughout our province. And in terms of 5-day forecast, again, we do have some calmer conditions on the way, maybe some showers on Thursday, Friday looking a little bit sunnier, and then the next system rolls in, bringing some cooler conditions for the weekend.
All right, soak up the rain as you see fit is the message from Darius.
I'd say so.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Canada Soccer's report in the Olympic drone spying scandal that rocked the women's team in Paris this summer is now done. It leaves a lot of unanswered questions, but it does paint a picture of a long-standing practice of spying on opponents that went largely unchecked. Sarah Levitt was in Paris when the scandal first broke and lays out what we've learned.
Canada came! Canada conquered!
She helped bring Canada women's soccer team to gold in Tokyo. But now, Bev Priestman is out for good as head coach. All part of the drone scandal that rocked the 2024 Paris Olympics, Team Canada spying on opponents, and it wasn't a first.
It's shameful, it's embarrassing.
An external investigation ordered by Canada Soccer reveals drones were also used during different tournaments between 2022 and 2024. Part of a, quote, symptom of a difficult and unacceptable past culture within the national teams.
They would be stupid enough to bring a drone to France there was a no-fly zone, there's fear of terrorist attacks. I wouldn't fly a kite during that time.
Canada Soccer's investigation is scant on details. The 400-page report wasn't made public, just a 36-point summary with names and other details redacted. But Radio-Canada has found the spying was pervasive under former Team Canada head coach John Horgan, now head coach of Toronto FC. Investigative show Enquête spoke with a former staffer on the condition their voice and identity be masked over fears of professional blowback.
No was not an option for the people handling the drone. If they didn't, they were practically pushed aside. Herdman put a lot of pressure on his staff.
Herdman wasn't interviewed for the Canada Soccer investigation and didn't respond to requests for comment, but he said this in July.
I'm highly confident that in my time as a head coach at an Olympic Games or World Cup, we've never been involved in any of those activities.
There's a crossroads here for Soccer Canada, and I really hope they commit to what they've said they're going to do is change.
Yesterday, we paused to remember military veterans for their service in current and past conflicts, but many vets are looking to their futures once they leave the forces. And for some, that means a different kind of service. CBC's Arthur White-Crummy shows us.
I still have a few things to do. I'm a little behind schedule, to be honest with you. No worries, mate.
Dean Brackness has always been hungry for adventure. He sailed the high seas for the Royal Canadian Navy. Now retired, he's taking on a new challenge at Ottawa's esteemed Le Cordon Bleu Culinary School. It feels familiar.
The head chef, the commanding officer, and then he has, second commanding officers, and then all the troops or the sailors or the airmen underneath him doing what needs to get done. So it's just like, someone walking off the street from a brigade or a ship would instantly recognize the organization.
Brackness is one of 8 Canadian Armed Forces veterans now studying at Le Cordon Bleu. The classes can cost between $13,000 and $30,000. But Veterans Affairs will pick up the bill. Word is spreading, and the culinary school is seeing a steady stream of recruits. About 30 veterans have graduated so far. A handful more sign up for the introductory program every few months, like Paul Fuller.
I was always interested in cooking. I wanted to become a chef, but my mother dissuaded me. She said, do that as a hobby.
Fuller thrived on hierarchy and discipline. He joined the Cub Scouts, then the Cadets, and finally the Canadian Armed Forces. He served in Bosnia and Afghanistan and retired as a colonel after 32 years.
I saw the opportunity to further my passion and come to Le Cordon Bleu to do the culinary diploma. And my aim is after that to work part-time in an old age home to give back to the community.
He's now about a month into his basic training. He's made puff pastry, risotto, and just finished 3 days of fish. Sharma says veteran graduates have gone on to coveted positions. He says veterans seem to thrive in a high-pressure environment.
They kind of, relate to the ethos and the discipline that they have had in the services. They find a similar kind of an environment here in the kitchen where it's all about teamwork, discipline, precision, being on time.
Brackness says Navy cooks are fantastic, but he worked on the bridge, not in the galley. His recipe is like a battle plan. He tries to follow it to the last detail.
You have a mission, here's your tools, that you do it, boom, and this is what you're supposed to do. And you have someone standing over you with not the clipboard, but criticizing you, So I'm in my 50s, I still get criticized for my performance. So
kind of like a drill sergeant?
Kind of, yeah, but nicer, a lot nicer.
Arthur White-Crummy, CBC News, Ottawa.
Food bank workers across Canada say they have seen a surge in the number of clients since the pandemic. And today, a report from the country's largest city shows just how widespread food bank use has become. In the last year, there were 3.49 million client visits to Toronto food banks, nearly 1 million more visits than the previous year. And it's surprising who's been going.
59% have a post-secondary education. Half of the clients have full-time employment. They've done everything right. They went to school, they got a job, they're working hard, and yet they still have to make use of food charity.
The head of Daily Bread Food Bank says the food bank anticipates their reserves so depleted in the next 18 months, they will have to reduce the amount of food they give out. 1/4 of food bank clients in Toronto are children or youths. Oil giant Shell has won a landmark environmental case in the Netherlands. The ruling overturns a previous one that required the company to cut carbon emissions by 45%. The appeals court today ruled that Shell is obligated to reduce its carbon emissions, but it could not determine the appropriate amount. The court also said Shell is already working to reduce emissions. In 2021, The Hague ordered Shell to reduce its CO2 emissions significantly in line with the Paris Climate Accords. That case was brought by an environmental group and 17,000 Dutch citizens. The group says it can now take its case to the Supreme Court. This ruling comes as a major climate summit gets underway in Azerbaijan. The head of the Church of England has been forced to resign. Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, led the world's 85 million Anglicans, but a sex scandal involving a Canadian-born church volunteer has brought him down. Chris Brown reports.
Justin Welby crowned a new king, and as Archbishop of Canterbury, he presided over the immense influence of the Church of England in British life as well as Anglicans in Canada.
I'm John Smythe.
But it was his failure to repeatedly stop this man that forced his resignation. Smythe was a Canadian-born British lawyer and a morality crusader who ran church camps in the UK and Africa. Over 5 decades, he committed heinous physical and sexual abuse against more than 120 boys.
Basically caned me so many times that I thought I was going to die.
Smythe developed
a Channel 4 documentary in 2017 revealed the extent and severity of Smythe's reign of terror and suggested a decades-long cover-up by church officials. An independent report released last week concluded it was at least partly Welby's fault Smythe was not stopped. That when he became Archbishop in 2013, there was enough evidence to take to police, but he did not.
I did not ensure that this was pursued as energetically, as remorselessly as it should have been.
Welby attempted damage control with an apology, but the pressure to quit grew.
I think that it's very hard for the church, as the national, the established church, to continue to have a moral voice in any way, shape or form in our nation when we cannot get our own house in order.
In 2022, Welby was in Canada to deliver an earlier apology for what he called the terrible crime of church-run residential schools.
Well, forgive me.
But this church critic says apologies without change are meaningless.
It's been sheer hypocrisy over the last few years, and I hope now somebody will sit back and look at this and say that we need to start afresh with how we deal with protecting the vulnerable in our church.
John Smythe died in 2018 without ever being brought to justice. In a statement on his resignation, Justin Welby said he felt shame at failing to safeguard the vulnerable. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
The election of Donald Trump as U.S. president has emboldened hardliners in the Israeli cabinet. The finance minister says he'll push for Israel to annex parts of the occupied West Bank. CBC Sasha Petrusik reports.
Israel has signaled that it is interested in annexing, seizing the land that's underneath about 150 of its settlements in the occupied West Bank. These settlements are considered illegal under international law, but they've been expanding rapidly. The territory is an area that belongs to Palestinians under that law, but has been gradually coming under the control of various Israeli groups. They've been building communities like the one over my shoulder here on that hilltop, and they have effectively dotted the West Bank with these areas that are not legally under Israeli control. Well, yesterday, one of the key cabinet ministers, who also happens to be a settler himself, Bezalel Smotrich, he said that he's asked his officials to draw up plans to annex the land under these settlements. And the Prime Minister today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, said that it is time to discuss how they can become part of Israel now that Donald Trump is going into the White House. Donald Trump is considered a friend of Israel. The last time he was in power, he allowed Israel to claim sovereignty over the occupied Golan Heights in the north. He also recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, something that under international law does not apply. However, this time they see Trump coming into the White House and saying that they will try to push him to recognize these settlements as well. The settlements, of course, have been very controversial among Palestinians here. Over the past months, the number of attacks by settlers on Palestinians has increased, and the tension between the two sides has only grown. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Ramallah.
Coming up, one of the most famous paintings in the world is currently undergoing a very delicate and very public restoration process. The process is expected to take years. More on this next. One of the most famous paintings in the world is undergoing a very delicate and very public restoration in the Netherlands. The painstaking process of cleaning and repairing Rembrandt's The Night Watch is expected to take years.
The painting will decide the pace, so we can't say, well, it's ready in a year or it's ready in 2 years. No, I think the varnish removal will probably be around a year, and then you can really see what the damages are, how we have to restore it in the best way possible.
The huge canvas, which measures 3.6 meters by 4.3 meters, was painted in 1642. Several conservators are currently removing a layer of varnish to reveal the painting's original depth and color. The next stage will involve the most extensive restoration of the artwork to repair damage and help preserve it for future generations. The painting will remain on display throughout the process. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/bc. Your next local news will be at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Have a good night.